Welcome to Men Talk Mental Health. I'm Ayush Yoda Banker, and with me is Venance Samson Roche. Today, we talk about anxiety.
The Prime Minister makes an announcement that the whole country is going to go through a lockdown, and overnight the country shuts. I'm alone in my apartment. My flatmate has already flown back to her home in Calcutta, and what begins is 8 days of intense stress and sleeplessness. I started feeling incredible amounts of fatigue, obviously, because of the lack of sleep. But I also started feeling physical symptoms. I thought I had a fever, but every time I checked, my body temperature was normal. And I really wondered what was going on. I tried to gain some normalcy. I tried to work since it was work from home, but I was struggling. I had to take a couple of days off, and it was just a strange situation. I remember trying to get some supplies in the afternoon, and I saw people with kitchen gloves and all kinds of face coverings and absolute fear in a whole bunch of people. It was just the strangest situation. And what I experienced during those 8 days was just intense amounts of anxiety and stress. And it's something that I won't forget. And I had to figure out a solution to it pretty quickly.
It was an intense time for sure. I definitely remember talking about it with you, and I remember going through the motions of trying to figure out, what the best case scenario would be for you in this case. Should I do this? Should I not? I remember talking about what is it, cooking,
Yes.
food, how do you get groceries. We discussed all these different things, and I remember the amount of stress you were under. I also remember actually, what a big deal it was for you to move out and finally be able to have your own place. So now to have to give it up and go back was also something that weighed on you. And I know that that was a stressful time for everybody. I mean,
Yes.
here in the States, people are fighting over toilet paper. It's the most ridiculous thing
Yeah.
ever. But literally, they were like stabbing each other over toilet paper. But I can only imagine what it was like in India. And I remember feeling this sense of fear for my home country at the time, India, because I was in LA. But I remember feeling, I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine what it would be like out there. And you would describe it to me, and it was just, it was scary. It was really scary.
Yeah.
In these 8 days, though, what was the biggest thing that you like? What is the one thing you were most afraid of?
So I was dealing with anxiety for intense anxiety for a few months now, and I actually had begun
Mm-hmm.
therapy. So I was just 3 sessions down. So that's too soon for it to have any impact per se. But there were three great sessions. But to answer your question, for me, I think it was just the uncertainty around the situation and the fact that we did not know much about this virus, right? So it was definitely the
Yeah.
start of COVID anxiety. I think before the lockdown, I was concerned, but I wasn't too worried about it. I had other kinds of anxiety to like deal with, but when the lockdown happened, it just felt like, okay, this is unusual. And suddenly the streets were quiet. There was nobody moving. The gates were shut. Nobody was coming in. I actually asked my house help to stop coming in and, told her, we'll pay you your salaries, but look after yourselves. And we got to just like stay uh, separately for a few days. So it was definitely the beginning of COVID anxiety, which in a way is the topic of health anxiety for me. Generally, being really anxious about my health and physical well being. And that's what it was. That's what I was experiencing at that particular point of time. And like you said, I was stressed out about the food situation because I knew only to cook like basics, like the rice, and that's on me definitely. And I had supplies for like breakfast and snacks and stuff, but just having like proper meals, and I was getting stressed because I was like, I need decent food for nutrition to fight this disease in case I have to encounter it. So there was more stress
Yeah.
being added
Yeah.
to that uh, time. And fortunately, I had friends living nearby, so their mums and they themselves were like cooking food and cooking a little extra for me, and I would go and pick it up. I would be the only one on the road with collecting tiffins from different like apartments, and like feeding myself. So it was a strange time, man. I was basically constantly trying to figure out where my next meal is going to come from. It did not matter that I had money in the bank to buy food, because food wasn't available. Like delivery of restaurants was shut, and groceries were like shops were running out of them, and there was just panic and fear everywhere.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I cook pretty well. I've done cooking for a long time now, and I'm still learning like random new stuff. I'll give you a little tidbit, a little piece of
Yeah.
advice. Everybody listening, actually. I recently learned you should never microwave a hard boiled egg. Now, I know it sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous, but uh, if you microwave a hard boiled egg, you then take it out and then you bite it, it will literally
Oh,
explode.
really? I didn't know that.
I'm not
Oh,
joking.
shit.
You can YouTube
Okay.
it. I know because at work somebody microwaved a hard boiled egg and had to go home because it literally exploded and shot into their mouth and burnt their
Oh,
face.
jeez.
It was not pretty.
Okay. I'm glad you told me
Yes,
that.
it's pretty ugly. So don't I'm not. It's funny because it's a hard boiled egg and you're like, who thinks about that
Yeah.
stuff? But now that you know, it's dangerous. Don't try it at home,
Oh,
kids.
definitely. Yeah.
Um, well, there you go. A little cooking lesson for you. But you touched on something very important with COVID anxiety, because I think let's sidebar for a second on COVID anxiety. I think everybody has now accepted that COVID anxiety is a thing,
Yes.
right? Everybody's experienced it. Um, I guess people who don't believe in COVID, maybe they don't. I don't know. But we'll leave that for another topic. But if you do believe in COVID, then you have COVID anxiety. And I know I've had it across the year in various different forms. For you, it was definitely more based on your health and your specific struggles with health in general, and what would happen if you were to catch it, right? If that is the struggle that was what was causing your COVID anxiety that much, then it made sense for you to make that move because you needed that security and you needed a way to get rid of that anxiety, because otherwise you were not going to be able to do it. But with that came its own anxiety of getting the disease and then maybe transferring it to somebody else, right? Because that's what happens when you travel home.
Yes, absolutely. So exactly. So there was my own personal anxiety, but it was a very difficult decision to make. And you remember how I was going back and forth with it. So, number one is I'm leaving this apartment and I'm moving back home to my parents' house or my aunt's house. It also felt like a defeat, you know? Like I lived for 2 years on my own. I made this big move out of my parents' apartment in the same city, right? So I didn't change cities or anything. So
Yeah.
I was moving into a different apartment in the same city, and living on my own with flatmates. And for me, it felt like a defeat that I was going back. So there was that sense of defeat, and but at the same time, I really felt I needed help. I needed some sense of security, some sense of safety, which I was not experiencing. I tried it out for 8 days, right? I spent 8 days by myself. I did different things in between, and friends were checking on me, and, video calls were happening, and they were concerned about me. So, but back then it was also Everyone had a sense of panic and fear. So it was a
Yeah.
lot. And going back, I was like very concerned about giving the disease, like in case I had it, giving it to my aunt who was 59 back then, my parents who have crossed 65, dad 70, and my grandmother who has just turned 90 a few weeks ago. So I had all these concerns and worries. And I remember my aunt saying, when I entered her house, I did not sit down for the first like half an hour. And I only sat down after I went in, took a shower, changed my clothes. And she said, "You looked like you were cold, like you look completely stressed out and frightened and concerned." And yeah, and so it was a lot. It was just not COVID anxiety, because it was the anxiety around giving it to somebody else, especially potential high risk people within the family. And what if, God forbid, something happened, and then I have to deal with that guilt of bringing the disease to them. Why? Because this 33-year-old guy couldn't live by himself and couldn't figure it out on his own.
Yeah, man. I think that is the definition of COVID anxiety. It's this fear that you're gonna give it to the people you love, and I completely get it because I had to work through the pandemic, as you know, and I was going into the office every day. We put in a bunch of different protocols and safety protocols and guidelines and plexiglasses and gloves and masks and you name it. I mean, we did everything short of wearing hazmat suits, but we still met people every single day, and we limited it. For some time we switched to virtual only, but those properties weren't running on their own. We still had to go in. So I had that fear because I had at that time I was living at my parents' place. I had my daughter who was vulnerable, so I completely get it. But I also had COVID anxiety because I was also at a slightly different place because I was also trying to date in the pandemic, which is
Yeah.
a weird thing to say, I know,
Yeah.
but like I was left single and separated at like the worst time you possibly could be. The pandemic hits, and oh, my beautiful perfect life and 7-year marriage is now ended. So okay, we go into lockdown, and now you're alone. And so here I am 4 months into the lockdown. I'm like, okay, I've spent 4 months. I want to just get some company, maybe just talk to somebody else. So
Yeah.
I'm on these dating apps, and I'm like, but dating apps don't go anywhere. Like, how many virtual dates you can do a couple, and then what? So like,
Yeah.
I'm torn between this silly idea of like I need company. I want to go out and get some company. I feel ready to make this move, but at the same time, I can't because I have to protect my family, and I don't want to get COVID for sure. I'm terrified. And then eventually, I make the plan, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to see this one person. I trust this person after speaking to this person for a while. I meet that person. Okay, I meet them, and we'd even do a socially distant one. Like we meet at a park, open space, mass. We just get coffee. We sit separately. It's distant. There's very low chance now, knowing what COVID is, that I would have gotten COVID. But
Yeah.
the next day, man, I had a drip in my throat, and I'm freaking out. And I'm like, my stress and my anxiety level has gone through the roof. I'm calling my doctor. I'm like, dude, I've got COVID. Like, what do I do? I go in for a test. And my anxiety actually makes me fall sick. I literally get a cold and a cough 3 days later, and I don't have COVID, but I end up getting strep throat, strangely enough. And I have to take antibiotics, and that's it. And that happened to me a few more times, and I realized that COVID anxiety is really powerful. You don't realize it because the stress that it puts on your body, and all anxiety is, of course, but that stress was so powerful on me, and it made me so fearful that it literally made me sick because my immunity would drop, and it actually was counterproductive. Like the stress exists, the anxiety exists to protect you.
Yeah.
Instead, it would harm me because there was so much of it. So
Yeah.
I know it's more humorous than your situation, but it's just to elaborate that it's definitely a real thing, and it can be really really harmful to your health.
Absolutely. And I remember I was thinking to myself, man, this guy wants to go on dates. Like, I am terrified to open the door every time the bell rang. And it barely rang during that point of time. And I was terrified to go down on a walk by myself with nobody else around. And here is Ayush planning a date. But I get it. I get where you're coming from. And I know you were being very calculated about it. So, but I remember the conversations as well. And you're absolutely right. COVID anxiety, and I think any kind of anxiety and stress, it takes a big toll on your body, because suddenly you have moved into like the fight or flight mechanism, right? And what
Yeah.
what happens then is that the focus of your body is no more to protect you against bacteria and viruses, but it's about just giving you the energy and blood flow into your hands and legs to run away from your threat. But your threat is invisible and it's imaginary. And I mean, it's not imaginary in this particular case, but it's something that you can't see, and it's kind of just around. And then it starts taking a toll on your immunity. So absolutely, I think feeling some form of physical symptoms due to anxiety, and then if maybe eventually, like in your case, actually having some form of infection is something that is very real, and that definitely happens. And the thing is, it's like a cycle, right? You feel COVID
Yeah,
anxiety,
exactly.
then you feel sick, uh, and then again you feel some more COVID anxiety, and you're just on pins and needles till you recover. And the whole recovery process also probably gets delayed because you're in high amounts of stress. You're not allowing your body to use its energy and immune cells to recover, to fight what it needs to fight.
Yeah, that should happen to me so many times over the course of the year. I never ended up getting COVID, but I got a bunch of strep throats, man. Like only because of the stupid anxiety. It would just keep hitting me again and again and again. And for me, anxiety is fairly new. It's not something that I've had my whole life. Frankly, I've been somebody who's been in sports a lot. I've built, kind of learned how to deal with high stress situations. I kind of love high pressure environments. It's kind of where I thrive. And so for me, I mean, it doesn't mean that those people don't have anxiety. It's just for me, I never had anxiety the way my wife does, or for example, you have had, which is a lifelong kind of thing. You've always had it, even as a child. So for me, this was my first experience with anxiety. I didn't even know what was happening to me. I had no clue how to deal with it. I had no idea. It was only in my conversations with you that I started to understand a little bit more, and then my therapist who really helped me deal with it. But I'm sure there were a lot of people who went through this pandemic who had anxiety for the first time, or were able to actually identify anxiety for the first time. But I know that's not the case for you, right? Because you've known anxiety for a long time. That's been a friend of yours since you were a kid.
Yeah. So my relationship with anxiety goes way back. Although I started therapy only in 2020, mainly to deal with anxiety, but my relationship with anxiety goes way back. And the thing is, see, everybody experiences anxiety, and we've all experienced it at some point of time. So, like a common example I would give from my life is before examinations. Right? You'd feel anxious irrespective of how prepared you are. You'd feel anxious, and for me, one big indicator was I'd start hitting the loo, you know.
Right.
And just before leaving for the examination, I'd start hitting the loo some 2 or 3 times more than usual. And that was a clear indicator. And, like my mom would be, okay, I think you're just nervous. And then eventually I would just be like, okay, I need to get to the examination hall. So I just like leave. And then I'd give the examination, and strangely, I'd reach the examination center and I'd be in a complete state of zen. It was a very strange thing. But I would
Wow.
then give, yeah. Yeah, I'd be in complete zen. People would be panicking and they'd be like, "Have you done this? Have you done that?" And I had this thing is why, you know what? You cannot change anything now, so you might as well be zen. And I'd just be observing, and I'd just be really calm. And I'd write my examination. And I would be very calm during the examination. And when it got done, it'd be like, okay, it's done. But it's that period before leaving for the examination is when I would feel like the most amounts of anxiety. And then over the years, the anxiety that I remember would be, I think it was around 2014, 15, 16. I would wake up in the mornings and I'd feel anxious. I would literally, I'm sleeping, let's say my alarm rings, or let's say I wake up on my own, and the first feeling I feel is anxiety. I can feel it in my chest, I can feel it in my throat, and I'm like, what is this? What is this feeling, and why am I feeling this? I have just woken up. It seems like a bright, sunny day in Bombay. Everything's great. I'm safe. I'm at home. What is this feeling? And I remember experiencing it and talking about it to my then girlfriend who had studied a little bit of psychology back in college, and she said, I think you should see a therapist. And I did not disagree with that suggestion. I did not scoff at it. I thought it was a really good idea, but I did not see a therapist back then because I did not think it was that bad. I did not feel like, oh shit, it's hitting the roof, and I had this perception about therapy per se, talk therapy, and and so I felt like I did not need it. And but yeah, and then that was my first freelance stint, and I was generally feeling anxious about making a certain amount of money, at least like matching certain peers, about getting my career in order. And so there was a lot of pressure that I was putting onto myself as well at that point of time. So I think being worried and overthinking and overanalyzing has been a part of the way of my mindset and the way I sort of just dealt with things for a very, very, very long time. It just seemed like that's the way I am, or rather was programmed. And then came the end of 2019. Everything is fine. I'm in a great job. I'm living in an amazing apartment in Bandra. It's a suburb of my dreams. I didn't think I'd make it to Bandra so soon in life, and living on rent. But and then for the second time, my gut health goes for a toss, and I started experiencing symptoms of IBS, and along with it came anxiety. And this time, I was able to be very aware of it, and I knew. So in the past, I was aware, but it was like, okay, it's not a big deal, and I just forget about it. But this time, it lingered on, and then just when I started working on it, boom, the pandemic hits, and it's obviously our first experience of anything like this, right? Because we never experienced the world wars or the Spanish flu, so it was something that I wasn't, or any of us were prepared for.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I don't think anybody was prepared for it. I mean, clearly, the response of our governments has shown that nobody was prepared for it. For a long time, everybody was like, "Oh, no masks. Yeah, masks. No, they don't work. Yes, they do work. It's
Yeah.
airborne. No, it's not airborne." Nobody knew what the hell was happening those first few months. It was just complete mayhem. Yeah, I mean, exactly. So, but to go back to what you were saying, you had this high functioning lifestyle, but slowly the anxiety was taking its toll on you, which I completely understand because it did the same for me just a little bit after this period in your life. So I completely understand that. And being high functioning people who are now living with anxiety, it requires a lot of time. What people don't seem to realize is that anxiety really saps so much of your energy and your life force that it's hard to live with, because it's like a succubus that's just taking away all the positivity and all the energy from you when you need it the most. And I think it's very hard to identify what's doing that. And I think therapy is a great way to go about identifying it. So I know that you and I have both had different experiences in therapy, but one thing we can
Mm.
both agree on for sure is the fact that the therapy did help us deal with and identify that anxiety.
Absolutely, yeah. It definitely did help, and yeah, in my particular situation, towards the end of 2019, I would say like the beginning of 2020, I think February, it started taking a massive toll on my life because I was feeling so much of anxiety that it started affecting my work, and I had to start taking days off. Uh, and fortunately, I worked in a great company with great managers, and they completely understood. In fact, one of my managers actually told me, "Hey, man, if you want support, I'll fly in." He was in another city. He's like, "I'll fly in, I'll join you for the therapy session. I'll wait for you outside just so that you know you're not alone." And I thought that was amazing. But yeah, but that little bit, that was a little nudge that I needed. That okay, you know what, I've got a little bit of support at work, and not a little bit, quite a bit actually. And I think I thought it was okay. It's time to sort of go and see a therapist. And definitely, I think therapy did help me process it. It's definitely one of the things that have helped me along the way. But yeah, I've just been this high functioning person. You know me quite well. We've been friends for what, like 13, 14 years now.
Yeah, something
Um,
like that.
yeah, and you know how meticulously I plan and I organize, become good at delegating over the years. And, I'm just like on the ball all the time. And yeah, I think a couple of things which I was already very particular about even before the pandemic is about washing hands, right? And because of some amount of
Yeah.
gut health issues in the past, I was very particular about washing hands. And what is it? Do you wash your hands for 20 seconds, 40 seconds? What's the rule? Like the WHO rule?
You sing happy birthday twice. It's 20 seconds.
Right. Yeah, I was anyway doing it way before. And I had a few friends, and I remember this one friend of mine, and he keep making um, not fun of me, but he would be like, "Hey man, just eat it. Like you don't have to wash your hands all the time, and just eat that food. You don't have to just go and wash it, and it's okay." And he would talk about the poor people living on the street and how they don't have like water to wash their hands, but look how resilient they are to infections. And then he had a point, but obviously, but then when the pandemic happened, and he spoke to me, and he's like, now everybody has got to wash their hands, like you wash your hands. and yeah, I was like, okay, I this is not a change for me. I'm doing this anyway. But yeah, but I was very particular about my health. I was very conscious about it. I remember one of my flatmates telling me, "Wow, like you are so aware of every little thing that happens in your body, little pain here, a little bit that, a little bit here, a little bit there, and so aware." And I would research, and I would meet a specialist, and yeah, and I found like some kind of balance. Like in a way, I was not going to the doctor for every goddamn small thing, but yeah, obviously, I was going to the right doctor at the right time, not waiting for it to get worse if I had any like health issues. But I was getting, and the term is rather hyper vigilant. I learned about that only during the pandemic, thanks to my therapist. But I was definitely hyper vigilant before the pandemic, and I got more hyper vigilant uh, once the pandemic began.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. That's why you were surprised and shocked when I was going out on dates. You're like, how is this
Yeah.
possible? But yeah, well, hey man, guys got needs sometimes. But
Yeah.
washing hands is something that I definitely do. I don't do the happy birthday twice thing. I think that was a company slogan actually. That one company sent out like a video. I don't remember which company it was, but they did it and they sent out to all their employees that you have to sing happy birthday twice slowly while you wash your hands, and only when you've completed singing it twice, then you can stop washing your hands. So I thought it was pretty hilarious. It's an easy way to remember it, but it's still stupid. Can you
Yeah.
imagine standing in the bathroom, looking in the mirror, just singing "Happy Birthday" to yourself? I thought it was pretty funny.
It is funny also because you probably are now washing your hands instead of like say 4 or 5 times a day. You're washing it like 8 and 10 times every time you touch something which did not belong to your house, groceries or anything of that sorts. My anxiety was so intense at that point of time that I believe that the virus is everywhere. Like it's already in my house. So, you know, it's I literally I did not touch my face for months unless I wash my hands first, and only then
Right.
I allowed I allowed. And people would sort of unconsciously do it. Like I would look at my parents and they would like touch their nose or they would rub their eyes. I'd be on Zoom calls and like I'd see like colleagues rubbing their eyes and someone typing and then popping in like a piece of chocolate into their mouth, and it was just alarm bells for me because I'm like, you haven't washed your hands, man. you know, Yeah. And it was just like, yeah, it's just like hyper vigilance. And eventually, when I did move into my parents' house, and my father has this terrible, he has a mustache, so he has this terrible habit of like touching his nose, adjusting his mustache, and like every time I'd see him, I'd just get mad. I'd just get super angry, because I'm like, how can you not remember this? Like we have few things to do: wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear a mask when you go outside, socially distant. That's it. There's no high tech level complicated shit that you gotta do. How can you not remember that? And yeah, it was incredible. I thought, was that game The Floor is Lava? Is that like some kind of game? You know? Uh,
Yeah, and I think they made it into a show on Netflix too.
oh wow, okay, I didn't know that. But yeah, so for me it was like the floor is filled with like COVID-19, like the virus, and so is like the tabletop, and so is the plate. So even like if I'd pick up the fork and spoon, I'd be like super particular to like pick it up from like the edge, which like handle that you hold. And yeah, it was just incredible, man. Like it was eating fruit was very complicated because you had to eat it with your hand. And everything became a process. Like everything, the way I took a bath to the way I would pick up cutlery, everything was a process. And I remember talking to my therapist about it, and she was like, wow. And I had like a meticulous, so-called scientific in my head process to everything, and I did it for months. But I got to tell you, man, it's exhausting, and that's where you lose your energy, not just in the overthinking, but also in the hyper vigilant acts that you do. And I did that for months, man, and it is exhausting. And I've reached a point now where I just don't feel like washing my hands. I still do, obviously. But I have reached a point wherein I'm not so obsessed about washing my hands. So, I mean, I still do it, obviously, when I need to touch my face. But yeah, I definitely overdid a lot of things. Now, it seems funny now when I look back at it, but in the moment, it was the most important thing that I could be doing to save my life.
That's so interesting because it's not that I didn't wash my hands or I didn't take care of myself, but I was in the office. Like I was surrounded by people. They eventually became like family because we could only see each other or we could see family. And my family was falling apart, so I could only see them.
Right.
So for me, experiencing that, I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm in a space that people are traversing every day. It's locked down to a controlled few, but not all of them actually even believe in COVID. So they do what needs to be done for the company requirements, but they aren't 100% believing in the virus and the science and whatever. That's fine. That's their choice. But I'm like, after a point, I was like, I'm probably gonna get it. Like, I'm still going to work every day. there's no traffic, so that's nice. There were a lot of perks to the pandemic in that respect, going to work.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I was not hyper vigilant because I didn't have the luxury to be at some point, if I can put it that way. And I don't mean it disrespectfully. I just mean that because I was functionally working every day.
Yeah.
I'm at a desk. I'm at my office. I'm not at home, and things are, flying at you thick and fast. At times I don't have the time to go to the bathroom to wash my hands before I get this done. Sometimes all I have is a minute to be able to grab a bite before I get into my next meeting. And I slowly just accepted that maybe I'm just going to get it. There's not much I can do. If I get it, I'll quarantine and I'll do whatever it takes. But I never seem to get it because I still took more precautions than taking no precautions. I was able to be careful. I was able to be calculated within reason. It's not like I was licking the floor or picking up ice cream, even with I gave up on the 3 second rule finally, and I wouldn't drop food on the floor and then pick it up and eat it
Yeah,
again
yeah.
and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, yeah, I understand that. So now, how has this routine of yours changed?
So it has taken a long time, and it's taken a bit of work. So number one is, thanks to therapy, I realized the poor relationship I have with myself, and the lack of confidence that I have in my body. That my body can actually protect itself, and my body has done a fantastic job over the years. I have recovered from every ailment, from every injury. It has taken me places. I've had amazing experiences. I've had an amazing life when I look back. And but I did not. I just did not. I did not have the confidence in it, and I was just really. I was really nice to people around me, and I was really compassionate and empathetic, but not with myself. That that relationship with myself was actually one of the big causes for feeling anxious, because I I didn't have that much confidence in myself, in my body, in my mind, in my ability to fight and recover. And it started with really small steps. Um, I remember my therapist telling me, the next time you feel like you're abandoning yourself, just make a note of it. And I immediately started making a note of it. And I was abandoning myself every day so often. And just by being aware of it, I was then able to make that shift. And when I made that shift to just, I it wasn't like I shifted to affirmations and all of that. I just realized, oh man, hey, yeah, I am like being incredibly hard on myself for everything, and incredibly hard on my body. And I just started making note of, like, okay, I've got through the day, my body's done a great job, I've done a good job, and just improved my self talk. So I think just having the confidence in your ability, just having that mindset. I mean, back then I didn't look at it as mindset, but just believing that you'd be okay was, I think, one of the first steps. And what was the proof? Because I always want to see the proof. The proof was, I've fallen sick in the past. I've had a very intense pneumonia when I was younger. I've dealt with bronchitis. I was diagnosed with asthma at one point. And a lot of people live with asthma all their life, but I actually don't have it anymore. So I had a history of like little poor health, and and I think it was just about changing that belief. And the proof was there. I recovered from everything, and I recovered brilliantly. So, so yeah, I think that was the first step, the self-talk.
That's a great way to actually think positive, find a silver lining. I think it's somebody else who had told me this, or maybe my therapist told me this, which is, you know what? You faced the hardest day of your life and you survived. If you think about it, that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thought when you think about it, because, yeah, you have. If you're here today, you faced the hardest day of your life and you survived.
Yeah.
And you're still moving forward. And that's pretty amazing. That's the exact analogy for your the way you saw your health and how your health had an impact on you and how you've turned around your anxiety and what it did to you. So that's an amazing, I think, takeaway from kind of this whole conversation is being able to flip that mindset and being able to spin it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because anxiety is a never ending subject, it's a never ending disease, and it's something we all have to live with, right? Like there's so much we can talk about, there's so much we haven't been able to talk about at all in this brief conversation. But we're definitely going to continue speaking about it in the future.
Absolutely.
But I think a great takeaway is this idea that if you are able to spin it in a positive light, in a positive way, in some form, you can then start to spin everything around as well, right?
Yeah. And I actually now don't look at anxiety as a problem. You know, um, of course, through 2020, it was a massive problem for me. It was a huge problem, intense levels of anxiety. But when I look back, and this is obviously thanks to the work I did with like the therapist, and then eventually, down the road, I'll also share the other kinds of help that I sought. I think anxiety was a massive, intense anxiety was a massive eye opener for me, that I needed to change a couple of things in my mind, in myself internally. And what I was doing is I was trying to actually, in the beginning, a little bit, I was trying to change things externally, or I was hoping that I could, calculate and be certain about things. So I'd be like calculating, oh, these many months till the pandemic gets over, and I'd be reading scientific data and research papers on the virus and all of that. Partly interest, partly anxiety. But yeah, now that I look back at it, I feel like, yeah, anxiety and any intense emotion for that for that manner. I truly believe any intense emotion which is becoming chronic, whether it's anger, whether it's anxiety and depression, I think it's just a way of your body and mind telling you something. And I think that's the journey that it set me out on. And if I look back, if I did not experience what I experienced, and yes, it was really difficult, and we'll definitely keep talking about it down the road, and hopefully it resonates with a whole bunch of people, and they realize that it's okay to talk about these things, and that it's okay to seek help. So yeah, but it was definitely like a turning point, and now I have a different perspective to it. And I think for a while I did not believe it that I have this perspective, but now I think it's been 6-7 months that I have this different perspective to it, and I look at it differently and able to like talk about it. I could always talk about it, but I talk about it a little differently now.
Yeah, I can definitely tell. I mean, yeah, we talk about it quite differently for sure from the place that we began at in our respective journeys, and I mean, we're going to continue talking about it as we move on to our next conversation. In our next episode as well. There's so much more to explore with anxiety. We'll move, we'll talk a lot more about how anxiety and panic are interconnected and the impacts that can have on you and has had on us. There's a lot more of really big pitfalls that hit both of us that we haven't had the opportunity to cover, which we will over the next few episodes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all that being said, I think this has been a great conversation. I want to thank everybody who's listening, and if you want to reach out to us, you can always do so at askmentalk@gmail.com. Send us questions, topics you want to discuss, anything at all. We'd love to hear from you. But apart from that, I think that's pretty much all we got time for today. Anything you'd like to add, Venance?
Yeah, I mean, you can also send us critique, some feedback. Ayush may send that to the spam folder, but
Yes, I will.
I'll definitely I'll definitely look for it. And yes, a massive thank you to Rhys Sebastian Saxon Toast on Instagram. He's the one who has created the soundtrack, the audio that you listen to in the beginning, and we'll play it for you now because it's an amazing track. We just created a brief for him, and he went ahead and worked his magic as always. And Tavish, who is actually a friend and a fiance to a very close friend of mine, He's a theater actor and a voiceover artist. He's a brilliant professional and a brilliant guy. And he does a little bit of graphic design on the side. And he was kind enough to create visuals, especially the logo. So, thanks to both of these guys. And here you go. This is Rhys Sebastian with the soundtrack for the Men Talk podcast.